Snap judgments reveal more about the judge than the target. When a person looks at someone and decides, within seconds, who they are, what they deserve, and where they belong, that judgment is rarely a reflection of the person being evaluated. It is almost always a mirror showing the insecurities, biases, assumptions, and unspoken fears of the one doing the judging. Think about how quickly people on that plane formed their opinions of the black CEO. They didn't know his story, his achievements, his responsibilities, or the weight he had carried to reach that moment. All they saw was a man who, in their minds, did not fit the picture of someone who should sit in a VIP seat. And instead of questioning their own assumptions, they giggled, whispered, and took his displacement as entertainment. But the truth is, their reaction exposed the smallness of their worldview, not the worth of the man they laughed at. Snap judgments are rooted in the mind's desire to categorize quickly. The human brain tries to make sense of people by using shortcuts: appearance, skin color, clothing, tone of voice. These shortcuts feel efficient, but they come at a cost. They erase complexity. They strip away humanity. They reduce a lifetime of experiences into a 5-second conclusion. And for the person making the judgment, these shortcuts reveal the absence of curiosity and the presence of internal beliefs they may not even realize they hold. When someone judges another person based on nothing more than a glance, what they are actually displaying is the narrowness of their perspective. Their judgment says, "My mind cannot stretch far enough to consider a story different from my assumptions." The CEO, in that moment, was not diminished by their laughter. They were diminished by the limitations in their thinking. Snap judgments also reveal fear. People often judge what they don't understand or what challenges their expectations. Seeing a black man in a position of luxury, authority, or prestige can trigger discomfort in those who have silently subscribed to a world where power belongs to certain groups. Instead of reflecting inward and asking why that discomfort exists, they release it outward through mockery or disbelief. Their reaction becomes a confession, unintentional but obvious. They were raised or conditioned to believe that status should look a certain way. And when reality doesn't match that belief, they expose themselves, not through honesty, but through ridicule. On that plane, the passengers judged first because it was easy. It took no effort to assume he didn't belong. It required no maturity to laugh. But what it did require was a mindset limited enough to accept assumptions as truth. When a person operates from such a mindset, their judgments reveal how quickly they default to stereotypes. They show how rarely they question their own thought patterns. They display how deeply they have internalized narratives about race, class, and worthiness. These passengers didn't just react to a moment, they reacted from the blueprint of their upbringing, their biases, and the stories they have seen repeated around them. Their laughter was an echo of a society that still struggles with equality. Meanwhile, the CEO's silence revealed something else: confidence. The fact that he didn't need to defend himself immediately, didn't rush to correct their assumptions, and didn't argue for his seat was not a sign of weakness. It was the calmness of someone who already knows who he is. Someone whose identity is not shaken by strangers' misconceptions. And in that contrast, their noisy judgment versus his quiet composure, the truth became even clearer. The passengers, in that moment, were telling the world more about themselves than they realized. Their actions painted them as people who believe appearances determine value. Their reactions showed that they measure others by outdated standards. Their laughter reflected their own discomfort with seeing success in a form they did not expect. Every time someone makes a snap judgment, they are revealing their worldview. They are exposing the categories they rely on, the stereotypes they accept, the biases they haven't unlearned. And ironically, the person they judge often walks away unchanged, while the judge is left holding the weight of their own assumptions. This is why so many people struggle when the truth is revealed. When they discover that the person they dismissed is far more accomplished, far more intelligent, far more dignified than they assumed, they feel the sting of embarrassment. Not because the person changed, but because their own mental shortcuts were exposed as flawed. True leadership shines brightest under humiliation. It's easy to carry yourself with confidence when everyone respects you, when titles are acknowledged, and when the world treats you according to your achievements. But the real test of leadership appears in those uncomfortable, unfair, and deeply revealing moments when someone tries to strip away your dignity. A leader is not defined by how loudly they demand recognition, but by how calmly they carry themselves when recognition is denied. On that flight, when the CEO was asked to give up his seat and people snickered as if he were being exposed for pretending to be someone he wasn't, he faced a moment that would have crushed the ego of many. Yet his strength did not come from fighting the humiliation with anger. It came from the power of restraint, the quiet confidence of someone who understands that dignity doesn't need an audience to exist. When a person is humiliated, the instinctive response is to defend, to lash out, to reclaim status through confrontation. But leadership isn't measured by instinct, it's measured by discipline. The CEO's calmness was not silence born from defeat. It was the silence of someone who knows that the truth always finds its way to the surface. A leader recognizes that moments of humiliation are temporary, but the way they respond becomes permanent in the eyes of those who watch. And in life, everyone is watching more closely during moments of humiliation than during moments of success. People remember how you behave when the world tries to embarrass you because those are the moments that reveal your true character. Leadership is often romanticized as giving inspiring speeches, making big decisions, or standing at the front of a room with authority. But leadership is equally present in the quiet endurance of disrespect. When someone tries to belittle you, the temptation to react emotionally becomes strong, but the leader inside you decides whether that reaction will build you up or tear you down. The CEO on that flight chose composure over chaos. He understood that if he allowed humiliation to provoke him, he would hand control of the moment to the very people who doubted him. Leadership means refusing to let others dictate your reactions. It means holding your ground in a way that is firm but not hostile, confident but not arrogant. Humiliation is also a mirror that shows who truly deserves respect. Anyone can look graceful when the environment is supportive, but grace in adversity is rare. When someone faces humiliation but chooses integrity, they silently teach everyone around them what strength really looks like. In that plane cabin, passengers saw a man being treated unfairly. Some laughed, some stared, some whispered. But the CEO understood that the greatest form of influence is example. His restraint spoke louder than any protest. His calmness challenged every stereotype aimed at him. And his presence reminded everyone that leadership requires a level of emotional maturity that humiliation cannot break. Leadership during humiliation also exposes the values that guide a person. When stripped of status, when name tags, titles, and perks are removed, what remains is intention. What remains is character. A leader guided by ego reacts to protect pride. A leader guided by principle reacts to protect dignity. These reactions are not the same. Pride demands immediate vindication. Dignity waits for the right moment. Pride wants to be seen as right. Dignity wants to remain true to itself. The CEO's handling of the situation showed that his identity wasn't tied to how others saw him. It was tied to how he saw himself. Humiliation has a way of revealing insecurities in those who shame others and resilience in those who endure it. When someone tries to humiliate a leader, they often expect a breakdown, an argument, a loss of control. But when the opposite happens, when the target responds with calm strength, the humiliation shifts back to those who initiated it. People start questioning the fairness of the behavior, the prejudice behind it, and the maturity of those who laughed. The CEO's humility under pressure didn't just protect his dignity, it turned the situation into a reflection of everyone else's values. Passengers began to see the imbalance between how he was treated and how he carried himself, and in that contrast, true leadership became unmistakable. And perhaps the strongest evidence of leadership is the ability to rise above the moment without needing to announce it. A leader doesn't need to shout to prove resilience. They don't need to argue to establish authority. Their presence, their calmness, and their quiet confidence transform humiliation into a stage where character stands in the spotlight. Power isn't in the seat you sit in, it's in the composure you carry. The world often teaches us that status is determined by where you stand, what title you hold, or what privileges you're given. But true power is far more invisible, far more internal, and far more unshakable than any physical seat, badge, or label. When that black CEO was removed from the VIP seat, people thought that meant his importance had been taken away, as if shifting him to another row could somehow strip him of the years of work, resilience, and courage that built his life. They believed the seat defined the man. But in reality, the man defines the seat. A person of true power carries it with them like an internal flame that cannot be extinguished by humiliation, prejudice, or ignorance. When someone has real power, they don't need to defend it loudly. They don't need to shout, argue, or prove themselves to strangers who have already made assumptions. Their power is evident in the way they breathe, the way they walk, the way they choose silence over chaos. Composure is not passivity, it is strength controlled. It is the ability to remain centered even when the world around you tries to shake your core. For the CEO, losing a seat wasn't losing status, it was simply relocating physically while remaining unshaken internally. The passengers saw him moved, but they didn't realize that the dignity within him remained exactly where it had always been, rooted in confidence, experience, and self-respect. In life, many people chase positions because they think those positions will bring them validation. They cling to titles, offices, and special treatment because they believe these symbols will make others see their worth. But the truth is, if your worth depends on a position, then you never truly believed in your worth to begin with. Power built on external things is fragile. It cracks the moment those things are removed. But power built on self-awareness, emotional intelligence, discipline, and internal stability stays solid regardless of where you are placed. That is why some people can sit in the front row and still feel insecure, while others can be moved to the back and still radiate authority. Composure is a form of quiet communication. It tells people that you are not defined by temporary circumstances. It tells them that you know who you are, even if they don't. When the CEO remained calm during the disrespect, he sent a message without speaking. He communicated that his identity wasn't tied to being treated like a VIP. His identity was tied to the truth he carried within himself. That's the kind of power that intimidates people without raising a voice. It's the kind of presence that makes others second-guess their assumptions. Power through composure also prevents others from controlling your narrative. If you react aggressively, people will define you by that reaction. If you break down, they will define you by that moment of weakness. But if you stay grounded, they have nothing to use against you. You remain in control of your own story. The CEO didn't let the humiliation become the headline of his identity. His reaction, or lack of reaction, became the real headline. While others tried to take his seat, he held on to his dignity, which is far more valuable and far more enduring than any physical privilege. There's also something deeply admirable about being unbothered in moments when the world expects you to crumble. People often mock what they don't understand. They underestimate what they cannot see. When they saw him being escorted out, they assumed he was powerless. But they didn't know the depth of his achievements, the challenges he had overcome, or the strength he had built through experiences they couldn't imagine. His composure became a shield against their ignorance. It protected him from reacting in ways that would compromise his integrity. And beyond that, composure inspires. When someone sees you respond with grace to unfair treatment, it forces them to rethink what strength truly is. It challenges their idea of power. Instead of equating power with loudness or aggression, they witness a version of power rooted in dignity, patience, and self-control. Many people in that cabin likely reconsidered their assumptions not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't say. The silence spoke louder than anger ever could. In the end, real power is internal. It travels with you, it protects you, and it commands respect long before titles do. The seat can be taken away, but the power within cannot be uprooted unless you allow it to be. A leader's authority is not measured by where they sit, but by how they stand when circumstances try to pull them down. Respect can't be demanded, but it can be earned in seconds. People often misunderstand the nature of respect. They think it works like a transaction. You give someone your title, your achievements, your resume, and in return they owe you courtesy. But real respect doesn't operate that way. It isn't purchased with credentials or forced through authority. It grows naturally from the way a person carries themselves, the choices they make, and the values they live by, especially when the situation becomes difficult. The black CEO on that flight walked into a moment designed to strip him of dignity, yet every gesture he made, every calm breath he took, every deliberate choice to stay composed allowed him to earn a level of respect that no title alone could have secured. When he was removed from the VIP seat, the passengers didn't see a leader. They didn't see accomplishment. They didn't see success. They saw only what their assumptions allowed them to see. And in those first seconds, many made the mistake of laughing. But respect enters the picture not when things are easy but when someone faces adversity without losing their balance. The CEO didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't try to convince anyone of his worth. In choosing dignity over confrontation, he unlocked something powerful, the realization among everyone watching that he carried a level of self-control most people only pretend to have. And that realization plants the first seed of respect. When people witness someone being wronged and see them respond with grace, it disrupts their expectations. It forces them to reconsider the story they've already written in their heads. Many passengers expected the man to fight back, to lose his temper, or to reveal insecurity. Instead, he carried himself with a quiet strength that made the entire cabin rethink their own behavior. Respect cannot be forced, but it can be earned instantly when someone behaves in a way that reflects wisdom rather than impulse, confidence rather than ego. Respect grows even stronger when truth is revealed. It's one thing to see someone handle humiliation well without knowing who they are. It's another thing entirely when their true identity comes to light. When the passengers eventually discovered he was not just a businessman but the CEO, someone more accomplished than anyone on that plane expected, their earlier behavior became uncomfortable to own. That discomfort is a sign of shifting respect. It's the moment people realize they misjudged someone who deserved far better from the very start. And suddenly, the same passengers who smirked begin to feel the weight of their own miscalculated assumptions. But the CEO didn't need that revelation to command respect. His behavior had already earned it. Titles can impress people, but character changes people. The passengers were moved not because of his corporate position but because of the way he acted when he was stripped of that position in their eyes. True respect is born when someone's actions reveal who they are beneath the surface. And the CEO's actions revealed integrity, restraint, emotional intelligence, and a deep sense of self-worth. Respect also grows when someone refuses to lower themselves to the level of those who wronged them. Many people react to disrespect by reflecting it back. They mirror the tone of the situation. But when someone refuses to respond with the same negativity, they elevate themselves above the moment. They show that their standards are not dictated by the behavior of others. The CEO's refusal to engage in conflict was not weakness, it was mastery. It was proof that he lived by a code of conduct that didn't crumble under pressure. People respect that because it is rare. It takes strength to remain controlled when your pride is challenged. It takes maturity to choose silence when ego begs for retaliation. Another powerful source of respect is consistency. The CEO remained the same before, during, and after the humiliation. He didn't transform when people learned his identity. He didn't flaunt his title or seek revenge. He stayed anchored in the same calmness that defined him from the beginning. That kind of steadiness reassures others. It tells them they are witnessing a person who doesn't bend with public opinion, someone who is grounded in values deeper than the approval of strangers. Respect also flourishes when people recognize authenticity. Nothing about the CEO's reaction was performative. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply behaved the way he believed was right. Authenticity is magnetic. When people see someone being genuine, especially under stress, they naturally gravitate toward admiration. His authenticity exposed the superficiality of the laughter around him and elevated him in the eyes of everyone who witnessed the moment unfold. And perhaps the most powerful element of earning respect is the way it quietly transforms the behavior of those who misjudged you. The laughter fades. The whispers stop. The eyes that once judged now follow with a mixture of guilt and admiration. That shift doesn't come from fear, it comes from realization. It comes from understanding that they were wrong not because he held a title, but because he held himself with honor, even when others did not. Public embarrassment can turn into public admiration when character leads. Moments of embarrassment feel sharp and personal, but they also act like a spotlight. They reveal who you are at your core. When someone is put on the spot, when the world is watching, when humiliation tries to shrink them, their response becomes a defining moment. That's why public humiliation has such transformative potential. If someone reacts with anger or bitterness, the audience remembers the outburst. But if someone responds with grace, patience, and strength, the audience remembers the dignity. The black CEO on that flight faced the kind of public moment many would fear, being asked to leave a VIP seat while strangers watched, whispered, and even laughed. That scene had all the ingredients of humiliation, yet the way he carried himself shifted the entire atmosphere. Public embarrassment is powerful not because of the embarrassment itself, but because of the shift it creates in the people watching. At first, the passengers saw him through a lens of assumption. They believed the removal from the VIP seat proved he didn't belong there. That belief made them comfortable enough to laugh. But when someone reacts to embarrassment with steadiness rather than panic, the audience is forced to see something they didn't expect. The CEO didn't argue. He didn't thrust his credentials into the air. He didn't try to prove the crowd wrong. His silence created curiosity. His composure created discomfort for those who judged him too quickly. His calmness created respect. These small choices began a transformation inside the minds of the people watching. When a person experiences a public setback, observers tend to focus on how they handle it. They watch closely, waiting to see if pride will take over or if ego will explode. But when instead they witness maturity, they begin to question their own reactions. Suddenly, the laughter feels misplaced. The judgment feels premature. And the person they underestimated begins to appear much larger than the moment. That is when admiration begins to take root. The shift is subtle. People sit straighter. They watch more carefully. They start rethinking their initial impressions. Public embarrassment, handled with strength, forces people to confront the gap between how they treated someone and how that person actually deserved to be treated. The CEO's reaction also revealed something universal. Humans admire resilience more than perfection. People are inspired when someone stands tall in a moment designed to make them small. They see courage, not weakness. They see self-control, not helplessness. And because these qualities are rare, they are respected deeply. Many passengers likely thought they were witnessing a downfall, but what they were actually witnessing was a demonstration of character. The CEO's quiet acceptance of the situation revealed a level of inner power that demanded attention. Admiration grows naturally when someone shows composure that others know they themselves might not be able to show in the same situation. Another reason embarrassment often flips into admiration is because truth has a way of emerging, and when it does, it changes everything. When people learned he was a CEO, someone far more accomplished and influential than they assumed, their respect multiplied. But the admiration wasn't just because of his title. It was because his behavior matched the maturity expected from someone of such stature. His composure didn't come from trying to uphold an image, it came from who he genuinely was. And when people saw the alignment between his calmness and his identity, admiration became unavoidable. The shift from embarrassment to admiration also exposes something about human nature. People ultimately value integrity. They might laugh at someone in a vulnerable moment, but if that person remains grounded, the audience's conscience begins to stir. Guilt appears. Reflection appears. And admiration grows from that recognition of unfair judgment. People begin to realize that the one who was laughed at possessed far more strength than those who laughed. That realization changes perception instantly. Public embarrassment becomes admiration because of contrast. The more unfair the situation feels, the more powerful the response of dignity becomes. When someone is wronged in public but refuses to be reduced by it, they elevate themselves above the crowd. They show that identity is not determined by circumstance but by character. The CEO didn't need the VIP seat to prove his worth. His behavior proved it for him. And the same passengers who judged him found themselves silently respecting him, even before they learned who he was. There's also a transformative energy in watching someone rise beyond the moment. People admire what they cannot easily replicate. Staying calm under pressure is difficult. Responding to humiliation without defensiveness is rare. Holding on to dignity when the world tries to take it from you is a sign of personal mastery. And mastery draws admiration the way light draws attention in darkness. The passengers saw someone who didn't let the situation define him, and that made them rethink everything they thought they knew about strength. And in those moments, admiration becomes a mirror for the observers. They see the contrast between their own assumptions and his true character. They recognize the difference between their impulsiveness and his restraint. And as they watch him navigate the moment with dignity, they begin to admire the qualities they wish they had displayed themselves. ChatGPT said, "The moment truth is revealed, the whole narrative shifts instantly. People build their opinions quickly, often without evidence, guided mostly by assumptions, biases, and the small details they notice in a single moment. But truth has a way of cutting through those assumptions like a sharp blade. It doesn't need permission to arrive. It doesn't require validation from the crowd. It simply shows up, and when it does, everything people believed just seconds earlier collapses and rearranges itself." That's exactly what happened on that flight. Passengers created a story in their minds about who the black man in the VIP seat was. They assumed he didn't deserve to be there. They assumed he was pretending. They assumed his removal was proof that they were right. But when the truth emerged, that he wasn't just a rightful passenger but a high-ranking CEO whose importance far exceeded their expectations, the entire cabin felt the impact of their own misjudgment. Truth has a way of exposing not just facts, but the flaws in people's thinking. When the passengers learned who he was, they didn't just realize they were wrong about him, they realized they were wrong about themselves. They saw how quickly they had judged. They saw how eagerly they had laughed. They saw how ready they were to believe the worst based on nothing more than appearance. And that realization brings discomfort. It brings silence. It brings a shift in energy so clear you can feel it in the air. In those moments, truth doesn't just clarify, it transforms. People often cling to assumptions because assumptions feel safe. They save time. They allow the mind to categorize the world quickly. But when those assumptions collide with truth, there is a sudden mental recalibration. The story the mind created dissolves, and a new one forms instantly. Passengers who thought they were witnessing someone being put in his place suddenly realized they were the ones out of place. They saw that their laughter wasn't just unkind, it was unjustified. And truth has a way of magnifying the gap between how people acted and how they should have acted. Moments like these also reveal how fragile public opinion is. One moment, the crowd sees a person as unworthy. The next moment, the same crowd sees that person as someone extraordinary. Public opinion can flip in an instant because it is shallow, built on perception rather than understanding. The CEO didn't change. His identity didn't change. His worth didn't change. The only thing that changed was what people knew. And that shift in knowledge forced a shift in respect. This shows that truth doesn't just correct the narrative, it resets it completely. Truth also brings accountability. Once people realize they misjudged someone, they can no longer hide behind ignorance. They must face the emotional consequences of their assumptions. That's why, when the truth was revealed, the cabin grew quieter. Eyes shifted away. Faces flushed. People who were laughing minutes earlier now sank in their seats, wishing they had acted differently. Truth makes people confront the parts of themselves they prefer not to see, their prejudices, their impatience, their lack of empathy. And that confrontation creates the narrative shift, because truth forces people to see not only who the other person really is but who they themselves really are in that moment. Another powerful part of truth's impact is that it elevates the person who was wronged without them having to say a word. The CEO didn't need to defend himself. He didn't need to announce his position. He didn't need to correct anyone. The truth did the work for him. And that silence made the truth even more impactful. It showed that authentic power doesn't need to be advertised. It reveals itself naturally. When the cabin learned the truth, admiration replaced mockery. Respect replaced arrogance. And curiosity replaced judgment. The crowd's entire emotional tone shifted because truth changed the lens through which they viewed the moment. Truth also has the power to teach. Everyone in that cabin learned a lesson they didn't expect that day. They learned how quickly they were willing to believe a lie just because it matched their assumptions. They learned that humility is safer than arrogance, because you never know who you're judging. They learned that the quietest person in the room might be the most powerful one. And they learned that treating people with respect shouldn't depend on knowing their title, it should come from valuing their humanity. Narratives shift instantly because truth reveals context. Context changes meaning. Meaning changes perception. And perception changes behavior. The moment passengers saw the full picture, everything about that moment changed. Their judgment dissolved. Their laughter died. Their discomfort grew. And the man they underestimated rose to a level of respect none of them had expected to give.